to the journey of the mind, or the bunny rabbit's hole.
Or the bunny rabbit's hole. I like that. All right. Hello, everybody out there in podcast land or / YouTube land or wherever you found us, whatever app that you found us on. We appreciate it. But as you know, because you found it, that this is the bunny rabbit's hole. And you also know because Craig just said it a second ago. And I, of course, am one of your two hosts. I am Jason, and this is...
And this is I am Craig.
All right. So, as you know, this is the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. And what we do here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole is we pick a central theme each and every week. We explore that topic as far as we can. And any time that something inspires us to talk about something else, a rabbit hole, we go down that rabbit hole. We talk about it until we reach an end or we finally exhaust Craig's patience and he brings us back to the main theme.
Yes. And as Jason said, every week we pick one topic and we spend usually about a week. Sometimes it's a couple days doing research on it. And we try to research both sides, not just what fits our narrative, but also, the skeptics or the critics and stuff like that. And we take everything with a grain of salt and we kind of form our own opinions from all this different information. But we also include our opinions, and this is for entertainment, so if you're easily offended, bye-bye.
Yes. And also, these episodes are to inspire you to research more. We only really scratch the surface on a lot of this stuff. Like the episode that we're going to do today, I'm going to let Craig introduce the topic for today, but we only scratch the surface in this because there are so many avenues to explore with this particular topic that there might be more than one episode on this one.
Yes, most definitely.
What are we going to talk about today? Or specifically, who?
Today, we are talking about the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce. And before we get started, I want to point everybody out to Edgar Cayce's ARE. It's the Association for Research and Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to their website at edgarcayce.org, and you can sign up for $59 a year, $95 for 2 years. And you, at that point, have access to over 14,000 readings that Edgar Cayce has done in his lifetime.
Yes. And like Craig said, this is an association that he started years ago. I mean, we're going to go through the life of Edgar Cayce and his family and his friends and whatever. But this is something that's endured through time. So, I mean, it's still going strong today. Like you said, it's ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And like Craig said, you should join.
Yep. I plan on doing it because I want to read these readings, and that's a great way to get access to every one of them. But
okay. I just want to, we are both really into the occult, into spiritualism, into self-enlightenment, into existentialism. We're into aliens. We're into cryptids. We're into prophecy. And that brings us to Edgar Cayce. If you don't know who Edgar Cayce is, he is a more recent Nostradamus.
Yes.
But
I would dare say
scratching the surface.
I would dare say that he's more accurate than Nostradamus.
Exactly. And I will put this caveat to the caveat between the two differences is Edgar Cayce did it well, and we'll go into how he did it. But Nostradamus, when he wrote out his stuff, and we'll eventually do an episode of Nostradamus too, he wrote, because he lived in a time where if you were considered a heretic, you were executed. And so what he did was he wrote what they called quatrains, which were 4-line prophecies. In each line, he wrote in a different language because he didn't want anybody to decipher what the hell he was writing, because he's going against the church by predicting the future, which only God can know the future. So therefore, the church would have killed him had they known. But because these were written in different languages 500 years ago, they've been brought up to different interpretations and different translations. So if you take something that one line is in Italian and you try to make the other lines fit to Italian, they kind of lose some of the translation. If you don't believe me, just take actually don't take anything. Just go find Stevie T on YouTube, and he does this really funny thing. He takes song lyrics, puts them into Google Translate, translates them into just some random language, then brings them back to English through Google Translate, and then sings the song with the translated lyrics. So there's not really apples to apples translations when you come to these, and you're dealing with 4 different languages trying to put them together. So that's why a lot of Nostradamuses are really just up to interpretation.
Right, right. And, Edgar Cayce is the most profound, or the most famous, let's say, the most famous prophet of the 20th century. Now, he was born in 1877 and died in 1945. Now, he developed his abilities at a young age. His grandfather had passed away, and he would see his, the spirit of his grandfather, and he would have imaginary friends that were people that had passed on. And this was at a very young age, and this is when he first started realizing his abilities. And he called the children the little folk. I like that.
Yeah, he was about 6 years old when he actually witnessed a horse accident that killed his grandfather.
Yeah.
And so when you say he was young, that's really, really young. So
yeah,
I kind of want to go through kind of his chronology.
Yeah.
And then we'll just pick points out and talk about him, because like I said, we're only going to be scratching the surface. So we may center a lot about just who the man was.
Right.
Today. So, like you said, he was born in 1877. He was born 8 miles south of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Now, this is important because a lot of his life centers around this little town.
Yes.
And then, in 1884, he starts school in Beverly. And then in 1890, an angel appears to him. Then he discovers that he was able to memorize school books by just sleeping on them. So like some weird kind of osmosis.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I've read a bunch of stuff over the last week and a half and a lot of videos, and one recurring theme in all of them was he was doing poorly in school with his vocabulary and spelling, and his father got upset with him and was that night had him at sitting down and was grilling him on his schoolwork, and he wasn't doing well. And a voice popped into his head saying, just sleep on it for 5 minutes and you'll get it. And so he just asked his dad, because his dad, when he was saying stuff, his dad knocked him out of the chair because he was so frustrated with him. So he gets back in the chair, and that's when the voice comes to him. And then he asked his dad if he could just have take a 5-minute quick nap. And his dad, said, okay, walks out of the room. He lays his head down on the book, sleeps, takes a 5-minute nap. His dad comes back in and wakes him up and then starts grilling him on it. And not only could he now spell all the words, but he had the entire book memorized.
Yeah. That brings, when I was in 6th grade, my English teacher had a Garfield poster on the wall of Garfield sleeping on a bunch of books that says learning through osmosis.
Right.
We looked at that poster and said, man, if that was true, because I'd be the smartest human being alive, because I like to take naps. And if I just put a book under my pillow, it'd be fucking great. But this guy did it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is after he did that and was able to not just spell all the words, but to, recite different parts of the book verbatim, his dad thought he was fucking with him, so knocked him out of the chair again. He's like, why'd you do that in the first place, you little shit?
Right.
And mind you, this is back in the late 1800s where that was common practice. Wouldn't fly today.
No. I mean, this is still like 27 years after the Civil War, so we're still primitive in our culture as for child abuse.
Well, and another amazing thing is, let's go back to the lady that he saw when he was 12. The angel, as you called it.
Yeah.
Because other thing says he just saw a woman with wings and told him that his prayers were answered and asked him what he wanted most of all. He was scared by this, because who wouldn't be if something like that just appeared in front of you?
Oh shit.
And he said that what he wanted most of all was to help others, especially sick children, and he would like to be a missionary.
Hmm.
And then things progress from there.
Yes. So like 3 years after he gains this ability to memorize books by sleeping on them, he quits school and he goes to work on a farm he goes to work on his grandma's farm.
Right.
Until she finally ends up dying in August later on in that year.
Well, I think we need to touch on something else to give people some context here real quick.
Sure.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but he finished 8th grade, and back then, going on to 9th grade wasn't required, and it was something that pretty much only people that were wealthy did.
Yeah.
So.
Because think of they had in this area, through the farm belt, and back then you had a lot of kids because it was labor force.
Yeah, Casey was one of 6 kids.
Yeah. And I don't care what time period, 6 kids is still a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So they would get them out of school. They give them a little bit of book learning, a little bit of reading, so that they could function in society and not get taken advantage of when they went to market. But outside of that, education really wasn't necessary to go to a place and learn about history and reading and writing, as long as you could manage enough to be functionally literate so that you didn't get taken advantage of, and then you can still operate and run your farm, because the main learning still happened at home.
Right.
Unlike today, where, and I'm not even saying like how kids are raised today is wrong, because we live in a different different society from it was 110, 15 years ago. But
right. And when it comes to like raising your children, I just want to touch on this real quick. What's right or wrong kind of depends on the environment you're in.
Right.
There's a lot to be said for you're a product of your environment. They say that if you want to know what your future is going to be like, just look at the 5 closest people that you hang around with.
Exactly. So back to Edgar.
Yes. Sorry.
Before we get into this, wow, that's weird. I brought us back.
Right. I know it.
So before we get on the huge tangent about parenting, we're both parents. We've raised kids. We both did we'll claim decent job at it. But back to Edgar. So
yes.
After his grandma dies, his family moves back to Hopkinsville, where he was born. Or actually, he was born. They lived in Beverly. He was born in Beverly, but they moved to Hopkinsville.
Right.
And this is where he gets hired out at Hopper Brothers Bookstore, which was kind of a turning point in his life, because now, even though he didn't go on and graduate from college or anything like that, now he's got access to books.
Right.
And he spends a lot of time working in the store, reading books, working with his family. And this goes on for several years until he finally meets, and 3 years later, he meets, or actually he meets her before then, but he gets engaged to Gertrude Evans, which is his lifetime wife.
Right.
And he meets her in 1897.
Right. Yeah, and something that because I'll touch on this again later, but Gertrude came from a well-to-do family, whereas Edgar obviously did not, and this is going to come into play a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So, go ahead.
The next year in June, he loses his job at the bookstore, not because of poor performance. It's just stores don't last that long.
Right.
And so he goes to work at a dry goods store, and then he works there for about a year. And then in July of the next year, he gets employed by a larger bookstore in Louisville. There's our fans in Louisville will smack me for that one.
Right.
Louisville, Kentucky, the J.P. Morton Company, which was a pretty big publishing house back in the day. He comes home for Christmas and decides to stay in Hopkinsville later on that year. So he leaves there. Then he forms a partnership with his father, Leslie Cayce, who was then an insurance. He's moved on from the farm and now he's an insurance agent.
Right. Yeah, and as you know, he's selling insurance, and as he's going about selling insurance, he was struck by severe laryngitis that resulted in a complete loss of speech.
Yeah.
So then at that point, he's unable to work, so he lived at home with his parents for almost a year. Then he decided to take up photography because he wouldn't have to talk.
Mm-hmm.
He could just do photography, and he developed a love for photography and was quite talented with it.
And yeah, which is another thing that becomes kind of important because photography is something that goes with him for the rest of his days. Now, going on to the loss of his voice, he meets Hart, who is a traveling hypnotist and showman, and makes him speak under hypnosis. Now, this is kind of a turning point for Edgar because later on, Edgar decides he gives his first psychic reading with the help of Al Lane. He diagnoses his own difficulty and regains his voice. So he wasn't able to speak for an entire year, and some of his he meets a traveling hypnotist that speaks with him under hypnosis, and then with the help of another psychic, he goes into this trance, diagnoses his own difficulty in speaking, and cures himself.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
You know, and when he went into these trances, he would have somebody document it. You know, what happened is he couldn't talk, so he would go into hypnosis, and while he's in hypnosis, and he had this theory that when you sleep, the soul leaves the body. So when he went in those hypnosis states,
mm-hmm.
He said that it's basically the soul leaves the body, and he's talking with, at the time, he called it basically like the world mind, which later turned into the Akashic records.
Yeah.
But he basically, you know, figured out what his treatment is, told it to whoever was recording the reading, and then went through with the treatment. And now this laryngitis came back from time to time, but he eventually fully cured himself of
it. Exactly. Now, Al Lane helped him with his first psychic reading. Al Lane was also a doctor, and Al brings Cayce into his practice every once in a while to do readings on his patients, especially the ones that his harder cases, because he'd witnessed Edgar solving his own problems. So he's like, let's see if this man can do something for the people that I can't help.
Right.
And in August of 1902, he calls him back to Hopkinsville regarding a little girl called Amy Dietrich. Her case net will play an essential role in the history of Cayce's readings because this is the first case where he helps somebody else.
Right.
And go ahead.
An interesting note is, by doing this, he was terrified. Him and his wife would sit down and talk about this before he even agreed to do it, because he was terrified that what if he gave the wrong diagnosis or the wrong treatment? You know, could he hurt these people more than help them? and he was just terrified that he was going to end up hurting somebody instead of helping them. Okay, go ahead.
uh, no, so this one is important because I'm trying to pull this one up here. Okay, so Amy Dietrich was born on January 7th, 1897 in Hopkinsville. She was strong and healthy until 1899, when she was attacked or where she had an attack of La Grippe, which caused her to go into violent convulsions. Each one would last about 20 minutes. So it's like an epilepsy type of thing, but like to the extreme. And this went on for a number of years until finally she went from doctor to doctor to doctor. And then finally, I'm trying to skip down to the part where Cayce's involved. So she met with Dr. Lane on how to proceed to cure her. Dr. Lane treated her accordingly for several weeks, using Mr. Cayce occasionally to follow up with her treatment. Now, her treatment was, sorry. Okay. Okay. Well, he came in, Cayce came in and did his reading and said that the entire thing was based at the base of her brain. And before this particular ailment was known, it was categorized, it was listed in the medical journals, but how and what it did, how it was caused and what it was caused was unknown to medical science at that time. Cayce lays down, does his little reading, and says that she's got an abnormality in the base of her brain, which they go in and they start treatment on it, and this girl starts getting better. So this from this, people started Edgar Cayce's fame starts to grow, that he's the miracle worker.
Right. And I mean, people from all around the world were, trying to get him to do readings for them. And there's an interesting case. I don't know if it's on these sites, but it was in a video I watched, that a guy was interviewing his son. And there was a guy in New York that Edgar was supposed to do a reading for. And so what he would do is he would lay on his back, he would cross his arms over his chest, close his eyes, and go into his hypnotic state. While in there, he's like, I think he said, like, the body is not there. He's running late. And then 10 minutes later, okay, the body is now here. And his son called the guy in New York, and guy's like, yeah, I was stuck on the bus, there was a traffic accident. Yeah, I just got home. So the person had to be where they were supposed to be for him to do the reading on
them. Wow.
But I mean, and there was a lot of inner turmoil with Edgar Cayce. This is something I kind of want to touch on before we go too much further, because he was a devout Christian. He was a member of the Disciples of God Church. He taught Sunday school every Sunday. He read the Bible once through every year of his life.
Yes.
And he was a devout Christian, and sometimes he felt as if his gift was going against his religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if I were to ask anybody about the Bible, it would be him, because I think if anybody had the most accurate interpretation of it, would be him.
Exactly. I do think that's kind of interesting, though, the inner turmoil that he had to have been going through, because if you in the Bible, there are a lot of, in especially the Older Testament, there are a lot of like references to not a lot of them. There's references to different cultures and different, like there's the Nephilim. There's references to other people besides Adam and Eve. Areas outside of the Garden of Eden. There's a lot of like weird little points that I would love to have sat down with Cayce to discuss some of these to find out what his point is, because the man was in tune with all the shit that I'm interested in.
Right.
We'll go into like some of the other not philosophies, but the other important things that Cayce would talk about later in his life about different civilizations.
Yeah, and things like reincarnation.
Yeah, which aren't facets of a Christian belief, but they are in other religions, like the
Hindu.
Hinduism and stuff. They're all into reincarnation, where the body reinvents itself.
Well, an interesting little side note on this is, at one point in his life, because somebody had asked him about reincarnation, and then he went back and he read from the reading, and he's like, I said this, because he didn't believe in reincarnation. He said it's not in the Bible. He eventually convinced himself that a passage in the Bible talked about reincarnation, and convinced his family of it as well.
Nice.
Because he had such a strong belief and such a strong faith, he didn't want to go against that. So, this is like, we've talked about religions today that just morph things to fit their narrative. Edgar kind of did that with this.
Exactly. Where is it? Oh, yep. He had some great, interesting views on religion that he talks about later, like the Christian Gnosticism and the highest form of Christianity, and grace, mercy, and forgiveness, the universal mind, which are huge concepts that I'm just gonna say it. Simpletons don't understand when they read.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of the Bible is, like you said, is interpreted to formulate a perspective to fit a narrative, and it's a really dangerous tool, because so many believe that book has I'll say mystical powers, that it's easy to, like with the Nostradamus prophecies, you can twist it and turn it to fit any specific point in time. But he's got some great views that would contradict a lot of the stuff that like Joel Osteen, and I'm not saying he's a bad man. I'm just saying, he's the first name that came to mind, like Pat Robertson and stuff.
He's a bad man. Okay, I'll say it. I'll say Joel Osteen's a bad man.
Okay. So when these fucks are picking on the less educated, then okay. I'm bringing us back to Cayce, because we're going to go down a rabbit hole that we need to go down a rabbit hole in a later episode about the rabbit hole about religion, because yeah. So Cayce's torn. He's basically two individuals at this point. He's Edgar Cayce, the man, the husband, the father, and he's Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet.
Right. And just some ideas of things that we talked about him being a prophet. These are things that he predicted: the stock market crash in 1929, the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler, the beginning of World War II, America's entry into World War II, the decisive World War II battles occurring in June of 1943, the end of World War II, America will maintain balance of power. He predicted his own death, which is something interesting, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
The deaths of FDR and JFK, the establishment of the United Nations, India's independence from Britain, predictions of human origins, which later proved accurate, the Essene community and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the return of the Jews to the nation of Israel, the discovery of land from Atlantis off the U.S. coast, which we talked about in a previous episode, and the Bimini Road proves it.
Yes.
Religious freedom would come to the Soviet Union, the collapse of communism in the Soviet Union, the alliance between the Soviet Union and the U.S., the shift of the Earth's poles around the millennium, which is leading. This is what global warming is coming from, people.
Yeah.
It's science. You can deny it all you want, but you're just stupid.
The Earth is round and it's getting warmer.
Right. Psychic phenomenon will be scientific approval before 1989, which I don't know if that one came true or not.
Yeah.
The rise of major technological industries. I'm not going to read them all.
Yeah.
He also predicted the
But
second.
the best one in that one, though, is blood will be used as a diagnostic tool.
Oh, yeah.
Because that one, I mean, that one came all the way to the point of making a little girl a billionaire overnight because she created a box that said that she could diagnose all these illnesses with this simple box. It's a great oh shit, I can't remember. It's Elizabeth something or other is her name, and she fucked over a lot of people because she used fake science and made $1 billion out of a box that would they said they could test everything that you were ailing just by a drop of blood in a box at a Walgreens.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
Right. He claimed, they said that he predicted the second coming of Christ in 1998, which, yeah, that one might not have happened. But
isn't that when Pete Steele was still pretty big back then, right?
Right. But also he had readings that didn't come true. And there is a theory kind of behind them, which is like if you're predicting the future, let's just say I'm predicting the future, holy cow, I'm going to get in a car accident next Wednesday. So What do? I don't drive next Wednesday. I stay home.
Right.
And it doesn't happen. So, yeah, shit like that. But
unless a car is going to crash into the second story of my house,
right,
I'm not dying in a car crash.
Right. And now here are some of his prophecies that have yet to be fulfilled. War will occur in the Persian Gulf and other straits. Major discoveries on human origins will be found. This one I find interesting. China will become the cradle of Christianity. Volcanic activity will precede earthquakes and tsunamis, which we have already seen.
Which has happened a couple of times just in the last, 10, 15 years.
Right. Ocean levels will rise and devastate coastlines, which we are seeing now.
Happening.
Earth changes will destroy nations around the world, which I can see that happening. But then 1,000-year golden age will follow Earth's changes. And I don't know if this is something he took from the Bible, because wasn't there something in the Bible that after such and such there'll be 1,000 years of peace?
Yeah, after like 7 years of chaos, there's 1,000 years of something else. It was a Book of Revelations thing.
Then a glimpse into the future of Cayce's future. Human lifespan will be extended. A new human root race will evolve. A city of gold will be discovered in the Gobi Desert, and a self-fueling perpetual motion machine will be discovered.
Which happened.
And then got by the government.
Yeah, the dude was he had bad brakes. I'm sorry, the man was a fucking mechanical genius.
Yep.
And he had bad brakes.
Yeah.
How do you have bad brakes in your car when you can create something like a perpetual motion? It's like it's like a spelling bee kid that doesn't know the alphabet.
Right. Now, before we're going further, I want to just put out a word of warning to people. Okay, there are tons and tons of videos on YouTube about Edgar Cayce and his prophecies. Like they have them year by year. Like here's one, the real Edgar Cayce predictions for 2019 revealed. Must see, don't be afraid. Okay, so there's 5 of them in here, and here are the 5 that I'm going to go through and talk about it. Okay. Exploding drones everywhere. Pope Francis to resign. Internet becomes bigger than TV. China becomes cradle of Christianity. 3D printed food. Sorry, there's 6. And a sea monster will be discovered. Okay, we already talked about China becoming the cradle of Christianity. So what these people did is they went and they read some of his readings, took one, that he put out there that is yet to be yet to come true, then added a bunch of their own. He wouldn't know about, how would he know the word drones?
Right. He didn't know about the internet.
Yeah, he could have accessed the Akashic records, but go through and read some of the comments. You know, like this person, Mountain Cam, commented on this. I studied Cayce's predictions for years, and none of this is in any of his readings. The readings are quite amazing. If you're interested in Cayce, you will learn nothing true here. He never mentioned the year 2019. The video is pure fiction. You can find the real Cayce readings on the internet, and they are well worth reading. Again, go to the site, pay the $59, and read them yourself.
Exactly. I want to touch on the China being the cradle of Christianity, just real quick. So let's say that there's a religious reform in China, which is actually is happening. I've met a missionary that her biggest prideful moment, most successful thing that she talks about all the time is sneaking Bibles into China in her luggage, which is illegal.
Right.
She could have been thrown into a Chinese prison and never seen again. But she made it in there. She left the Bibles behind and whatever. So let's say that they do have a reform in religion in China, and let's say 1/5 of their population is now Christian. That is, with the 1.5 billion people that are there, I said 1/5, right? Yeah, we'll go with 1/5. Yeah. If 1/5 of them is there, that means there's 300 million Christians in China. Guess what? There's only 320 million Americans. That means by default, China would be the cradle of Christianity because by population. Now,
right.
Of the 320 million Americans, maybe a third of them are Christian. Because let's face it, that puts us down to like 100 million Christians in America versus the 300 million in China. So in America, you're not the cradle of Christianity.
Nor were you ever. I mean,
no, we never were, and we never should be.
No.
We should never make policy based on the Bible.
No.
Okay? And I'm not here to disparage the Bible at this particular moment in time, but what I am doing is it doesn't represent America. Not all Americans are Christian. And once the Christians understand this fact, then it's just like yelling about racism when there is no racism. You can't get rid of racism when you start manufacturing racism.
Right.
There was an incident the other day where 2 African American TV anchors were complaining about a white senator eating fried chicken, making fun of another white senator, saying it's racist. It's only racist because you're African Americans bringing up an African American 60s stereotype. Okay?
Right.
That's the racism. You brought the racism into it. So once we get past all that stuff, past the fact that not every American is Christian and that Bible does not represent everybody, can you move on as a society? So off my pulpit, that's kind of the inner turmoil that Cayce had going on in his own head. He's got this whole, I'm a Christian, everybody needs to believe this, all my being needs to believe that all this Christian values. But on the other side, he's got the world open to him.
Right. Well, and
that, my friend, is called a segue.
Right. So now, a lot of people throughout his life tried to take advantage of him, including his own father. It got to a point where, his father was doing his, being the one to document all of his readings and ask him the questions and stuff like that while he's in his hypnosis state. Well, his father and other people would start asking him questions about the stock market, about horse races and stuff like that. And he would give them, and he wouldn't know what he was, doing because he's in this hypnotic state. He never remembered anything that happened in his readings.
Right.
So his father's asking this stuff, and his father's making a pretty penny off him, and he had no idea what was going on because his father didn't write that part down, but so he started getting sick from his readings because he didn't understand what was going on, and then like I think it was his wife found out what his father was doing and told him about it, and at that point his father was no longer allowed in the room while he did them, and his wife started doing them. Then they eventually hired this lady, I want to say Gladys Davis or something like that.
Yes.
To do.
And she was a young lady. We'll go into her in a minute, but yeah. So Dr. Wesley Ketchum, Albert Noe, and his father Leslie Cayce formed, and obviously Edgar Cayce formed something called the Psychic Reading Corporation, and he was giving daily readings on medical cases. And this is where they did this for a while, and the cash was rolling in, and obviously Dad was taking advantage of it. So so when they move on from this, they go in and like I said, the money's just rolling in, and he starts in February of 1911. He is put in the Randolph Hearst Chicago Examiner publicizes Edgar Cayce for the first time. Now, people have known about Cayce up until this point because they remember the story about Amy Dietrich, and so he's starting to get more and more well known. So in March, Edgar, his dad and Noe go to Chicago for a few days, and Edgar gives readings for the paper, and these are just like random predictions of what were going on, and so there's a lot of stuff that was going on in the year of 1911 for Edgar Cayce. I mean, he's being like I said, he was being put in the paper, interviewed. He's doing readings for the paper, but this is when Edgar and Gertrude have their second son, but it dies just a couple months later.
Right.
And Edgar helps. That's a different one. But so after this, a couple months after that, Gertrude develops severe tuberculosis, and he uses readings to save her life and allow her to fully recover. So Edgar had a really productive 1911 with the paper, the birth of his son, the death of his son. He solves a George Dalton's case. It was an accident due on a construction site. So there's a lot of stuff that happened in this time period for him.
Right. I want to go back to the Ketchum thing. Yeah. Because Cayce refused payment. And this going back to the finances thing that I touched on earlier. Cayce never wanted to get paid for his readings.
No.
So the only way he would go into business with Ketchum is if he did not take any money for the readings. So, I mean, and again, his wife come from a well-to-do family. This is something she's not used to. They never had money because he would never take money for him because he didn't want to profit off what he was doing.
Right. Like I said, the money was rolling in, but Edgar wasn't getting it.
Right. Everybody else was profiting off of Cayce.
Yes.
I mean, and he got so fed up with it, he quit the company and moved to Selma, Alabama, where he went back into photography.
Yes. And then shortly after that, his family moves down with him. Now at this time, he's got two sons.
Edgar and what's the other one?
Hugh. Yeah, Edgar and Hugh. But between then, he's got
his daughter too. His daughter Milton.
Oh yeah. I forgot. Oh yeah.
Is it girl? I'm not sure. It's Hugh, Milton, and Edgar.
Yeah. So Harvard actually came to Hopkins before they moved down to Selma. Harvard came to study Cayce, and he did a reading for a Dr. Hugo Musterberg, and that Edgar was kind of out of it at this point because he was frustrated with his dad and everybody else that was around him. That's just when he quits and he goes down to Selma. But when he's in Selma, his oldest son, Hugh Lynn, severely burns his eyes in the studio with flash powder. And if you don't know what that is, back then it was basically like gunpowder, and it would get ignited, it would brighten the room up, and that was the flash. Now we have LEDs, we have all these other safe things for flash, but this burned his eyes really bad. So Edgar went to work. He started doing readings, and through this, next thing you know, Hugh can see again.
Right. And an important note on that, the doctors told him because they took him to the doctor first, and the doctor said he's never going to see again.
Right.
And Edgar's like, I'm going to start doing some readings. I'm getting this shit fixed. And he did it.
Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am?
I'm Edgar fucking
prophet, motherfucker.
But yeah, so I mean, and this is when when they hired Gladys, and I go through and watch some documentaries because they actually interview Gladys in some of the documentaries, and she seems like a really good person and a good person to work with Edgar.
He hired her when she was only 18 years old.
Yes.
So they basically took her in and made her part of the family right away. And he kind of looked at her as his daughter. Right. But she did all the transcribing of his prophecies while he slept from this point on.
Right. Yeah. And, he had all this fame and people were coming to him, but again, he didn't want to. And he's like, well, there's also in 1923, Arthur Lammers, a wealthy printer and student of metaphysics, persuaded Cayce to give readings on philosophical subjects. Cayce was told by Lammers later, while in his trance state, he spoke of Lammers' past lives and of reincarnation, something Lammers believed in. Reincarnation was a popular subject of the day, but it's not accepted part of Christian doctrine. Because of this, Cayce questioned the stenographer about what he said in his trance state and remained unconvinced. He challenged Lammers' charge that he had validated astrology and reincarnation in the following dialogue. Cayce, I said all that? I couldn't have said all that in one reading. Lammers, no, but you confirmed it. You see, I've been studying metaphysics for years, and I was able by a few questions, by the facts you gave, to check what is right and what is wrong with a whole lot of stuff I've been reading. The important thing is that the basic system which runs through all the mystery religions, whether they come from Tibet or the pyramids of Egypt, is backed up by you. It's actually the right system. His stenographer recorded the following. In this, we see the plan of development of those individuals set upon this plane, meaning the ability to enter again into the presence of the Creator and become a full part of that creation. Insofar as this entity is concerned, this is the third appearance on this plane. And before this one, as the monk, we see glimpses in the life of the entity now as were shown in the monk. In this mode of living, the body is only the vehicle ever of that spirit and the soul that waft through all times and ever remain the same. This is interesting because when Edgar Cayce would go into his trances, his speech pattern and his language would somewhat change into a more ancient language, like these and thous and stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the things that I found was good at this point was he comes out with that when it comes to like reincarnation and what Lammers was trying to solidify, was Edgar came out and said that basically we were given two gifts as humans. We were given consciousness and we were given free will.
Right.
And whatever we do with our mind, and okay, this is what he says. Whatever we do with our mind and will come back to us, not as a punishment or retribution, but as education and enlightenment. So that's kind of what he said about reincarnation.
Right.
is that basically everything's the goal. It comes back to the golden rule. You do good, and good things will happen for you.
Right.
Um,
See, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was going to continue on, but if you have another point.
Nope, not yet. I'm still catching up to it. So go ahead. Go with your other point.
Okay, so later on that year, after he met with Lammers, he and his family actually go to Dayton and meet with him for a little bit longer, and they do a lot more metaphysical, psychological, and astrological topics. And
Right.
this is kind of, I believe, when he started getting into expanding into different realms, and he'll go into like Atlantis and a lot of this other stuff. And I the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I kind of think this is the jumping off point.
Yeah.
Up until then, everything was like about the body, about the mind, and about the soul.
Right.
Just a couple of just a couple of the Infinity Stones. So I think after this, he jumps off and he wants the whole gauntlet.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because it's, like you said, he moved up to Dayton. His family eventually followed him. His wife was dubious, but she was interested, and he's still troubled about this whole reincarnation thing at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It still bothers him because it goes against everything he knows. And like you said, at this point, it's what, 1923. He was born in 1877. So that's 13 and 23 is 36 years old.
Yeah.
So he's read the Bible based roughly around, say he started reading.
Close to 40 times now, probably.
So, and he has, again, with that osmosis of reading thing, he has a better understanding of it than anybody. So this is when he's really going, he has to figure out a way to overcome this conflict within himself. Because, and this is from the Wikipedia page, it says Cayce reported that his conscience bothered him severely over this conflict. His readings of reincarnation were going against his biblical teachings, and at one point he wanted to cease his channeling sessions. Once again, Cayce lost his voice, and in a reading for himself, he was informed if he was no longer going to be a channel, his mission in this life was complete. Ultimately, the voice, the we of the readings, dialogued with Cayce and finally persuaded him to continue with these kinds of readings. So basically, he was told, you're either going to continue doing these readings or we're gone and you're never going to be able to do them again.
Oh.
Or you're dead. However you want to interpret it.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, that's when Lammers he was really into this. He really wanted to know what made Cayce tick.
Yeah. So, so he spends a few years down there, but between moving to Dayton and he made a couple predictions earlier, but the next big evolution I think that happens with Edgar Cayce is in 1929 because he predicted the stock market crash and the ensuing depression.
Right.
And
well, I mean, before you get there, it's something else, because we kind of have to close the Lammers chapter. After he moved to Dayton and he's hanging out and working with Lammers basically went bankrupt, lost all his money.
Okay.
So at that point, in a reading, the voice instructed Cayce to move to Virginia Beach, Virginia. So in 1925, he moved to Virginia Beach. Now go ahead.
Okay. Actually, I'm glad you did that because that's a great jumping off point. Now he's in Virginia Beach, and years prior, he predicted that the stock market would in fact crash. And this, I think, is a really fucking ballsy move because in October, the stock market crashes. Mm-hmm. Everybody's losing everything. There's no work. There's no jobs. There's no future. People are down. So what does Cayce do? He opens a university.
The Association of National Investigations.
No, I'm talking about Atlantic University.
Oh yeah, because that's a hospital that he built
Yeah, yeah.
in Beach. My
Yeah.
bad.
No, no worries. Yeah, he starts Atlantic University in 1930. Now, I'm looking at Atlantic University's website right now, and right there on their page, right there in their, um, it's page 2 of their catalog is a picture of Edgar Cayce, the spiritual philosopher and holistic healing pioneer. Edgar Cayce helped found Atlantic University in 1930.
Did you do it with this Blumenthal and Brown?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note. Okay, I'm just going to read this straight from the Wikipedia page. There was a waiting list of months ahead. Blumenthal and Brown went ahead with ambitious plans for a university as a supplement to the hospital, because they built a hospital first before this at Virginia Beach, but with the stock market crash and everything, they lost the hospital. As a supplement to the hospital and a parallel service for the mind and spirit. In fact, it was to dwarf the hospital and rival other universities in respectability before psychic studies would begin. It was opened on September 22nd, 1930. On September 16th, Blumenthal called a meeting of the association, resulting in his ownership of the hospital to curb expenses. After the first semester, he seized the support of the university, and on February 26, 1931, closed down the association. Cayce removed the files of the readings from the hospital and took them home.
Yeah. So this is still on their Atlantic University 2019 catalog. Question: Is the present an auspicious time for an establishment of a university? Answer: The time is at hand. The harvest is ready. Begin. Commence. Understand to succeed, it must be built upon that is given.
Oh.
So I just think that's kind of a ballsy to, what, we're just going to start a university.
Right. Hey, I want to jump in here because I want to give people a taste of his readings.
Yeah.
And I've on his edgarcayce.org, I found some. Here's the question: will our lifespan as human beings be extended? And before we go into reading, it says, we know that humans are now living longer than at the time of Edgar Cayce, but his readings seem to indicate that a healthy human lifespan would extend years beyond that which we are currently living. His answer to this in his hypnotic state was, now we find there are many changes in the body since we have had this, many for good. Many of the organs and conditions show the changes has come about by the natural, or so-called natural conditions, and changes as the body succumbs to the effects of age or usage in the system. Much of this may be overcome. Man should live much longer than has been ordinarily given, and will. Now, I'm just going to go on to say something. This Akashic Records, this universal mind, these angels, whatever he's channeling, man, they like to fuck with you the way they talk. It's like into a fucking Sphinx with their goddamn riddles.
Right. Right. Just a simple yes or no.
Right. And now will we discover the design for a self-fueling perpetual motion machine? Okay, here is his reading on it. You will have before you the gasless motor invented by, doesn't say. I think they've kind of blocked some of this out with these numbers, 4666. Okay. Then Cayce, yes, we have the body and inquiring mind of 4666. Also the association and those conditions surrounding the perfection of motor, which will develop power in its own actions. As has been given, the idea and the plans have been worked out in part along those lines that pull more of the power as produced in compression in drum, with the leads made in these forms that gather vibrations from the air as it's forced through the drum, are, as we find, the better application of the created energy. In the cam have been used too much slack or play is allowed in their rotation. This is in the drum's head action that these must be shortened in play. Holy shit. And there's more to go on with it, but I'm not going to read all of it because it's hard to read, and the way the speech pattern is.
My head was spinning.
Yeah.
It was like, it's like you went and picked up a owner's manual from any Radio Shack and just started reading it.
Right. But I mean, these are just, kind of examples of his readings, like the conflict in the Persian Gulf. Here we go. as is understood by many, in the Earth's manifestation and the cycle of time which repeats itself. There are still influences indicated in the lives of groups banded as nations, banded as people, still influenced by those happenings. When then ye ask, is the influence that makes for this great change that may be expected? Now, this is a bunch of different readings I'll put together, mind you. The powers of light and darkness, as then as 1600 years before, as in those periods, so today, we find nation against nation, the powers of death, destruction, the wrecking of that which has been and is held near and dear to the hearts of those who have through one form or another set ideals. These are not to be questioned, and that as may be helpful for us, but what is coming to pass, and how may ye as individuals help? Strifes will arise through the period. Watch from near Davis Strait in the attempts there for the keeping of the lifeline to the land open. Watch for them in Libya and in Egypt, in Ankara and in Syria, through the straits and about those areas above Australia, in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf.
Breathe.
Yeah, no shit, man. That's a tough one. But I mean, these are examples of his readings, and you know, yes, they leave room for interpretation. I'm just gonna put that out there.
They're pretty vague.
Yep.
But just like they would say with Nostradamus, though, at times he's describing technology and things that he doesn't know.
Right.
Kind of like even in the Bible, they mention the symbology that they use to reference things that they don't know, that they're trying to describe. Like in Ancient Aliens, there's one episode about the Bible. They talk about the winged chariots, you know, and the fire surrounding the winged chariot. You know, this could be a spaceship entering the atmosphere. It's going to have a cloud of fire on it. So his technological reference or frame of reference isn't, you know, to what we would know. So we have to kind of go back and try to figure out what is he really referring to, you know, imagine somebody trying to see Star Wars for the, you know, see like the latest Star Wars and then, you know, back in the 40s, and then have them try to explain it to you.
Right. And, you know, with like the self-propelling engine thing, you know, when he says drums, what pops into my head are like the pistons. The pistons, you know, and that basically, you know, they build up the energy and powers, you know, everything else. So I can kind of see where, so, you know, looking back at what they had then to what we have now, I can kind of put it together.
You know, and let's face it, it's time for an engine like that. We have the internal combustion engine in our car. And you know what? The only thing different about it in the last 140 years is sometimes they're electric.
Yeah.
Really? That's the best we can do? Just think about what we've done technologically in the last 30 years. Like, I don't know, the fucking internet. And we can't come up with an engine that doesn't run on gas?
Well, what would we do with all the oil and gas companies that run our country?
You know what? There's a lot of huge corporations that went under. Sears and Roebuck, they built the world's biggest tower in Chicago, and guess what? They're not even a company anymore. They were bought by Kmart, and then Kmart went under. So fuck them.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. I mean, it's all the reason why we don't have this engine is because of greed and corruption in our own government.
Exactly. Well,
so back to Cayce, because in 1931, shit gets interesting.
Yes.
So what happens in 1931, Jason?
Okay. This is when, so the hospital's officially closed. The Association for National Investigators is dissolved. We didn't really go into that, but it wasn't really that
it wasn't very interesting.
The Association for Research and Enlightenment was incorporated and begins on July 7th.
And it's still going today. That's where I told you to go to their website.
At the end of the year, I'll say this little blip. The Atlantic University stops its activities, but it does start again down the road. But ARE still going today, like Craig has mentioned multiple times. For less than $60, you can get access to all this stuff. We're not even being paid for this, but we're still talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by anybody, but we're still talking about it because we think it's a great deal. And I am actually going to go and get myself a membership.
Nice. I probably will too.
Yeah, because I mean,
There's no
$60
probably.
for a year to better myself. Fuck yeah.
Right. And this isn't like some fly by night, The Secret thing. If you want any of that type of stuff, you can go back to our law of attraction episode and you can learn
Right.
about that stuff. But with this, this is tried true, and most of the shit that you're going to get on these law of attraction sites are based on the stuff that you can find here. So you might as well go to the real source.
Right. And this isn't so much about, I mean, let's be realistic. When people like, I need to use this law of attraction, they're using it for selfish reasons. They're using it for, prosperity and wealth, all this stuff. I look at this stuff and I'm like, I would love to have enlightenment, to be a better person. I mean, yeah, I need money. Everybody needs money. I like money, but I like my own mental health better.
Right. You don't need most of the shit that you buy is because you're not right in the noggin.
Right.
It's just a fleeting moment of exuberance, and then it's like I said, it's fleeting, then it goes away. But if you can work on your own ticker and your noggin, get your body right, get your mind right, get your heart right,
Yeah.
you don't need that shit.
Because realistically, how much of the shit that you buy do you actually use? Unless it's groceries or something like that.
And before you answer that, how many times have you said this phrase? Man, we should have a yard sale.
Yeah.
So if you tell yourself you need a yard sale, chances are you got too much shit.
Right. Oh, an interesting note too. When Cayce moved to Virginia Beach, the Blumenthal bought them a house.
Oh, that was nice. I want friends like Blumenthal.
Right. But yeah, so like Cayce said, they opened up the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and so at that point, Cayce returned the house to Blumenthal and bought another place because he, like everybody else, didn't want to feel indebted to anyone, because nobody does, realistically. I mean, yeah, there's people out there looking for handouts, but yeah, it is what it is.
Right. And now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in time, because 12 years later is Thomas Segru, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, writes the biography There Is a River.
Yes.
So now, unless you had access to newspaper archives, which they weren't on microfiche yet, they weren't on the internet yet, finding a lot of stuff about Cayce was kind of hard.
Right.
I mean, there was myth, there was legend, there was speculation. A lot of this stuff would go around, but the news cycle wasn't like it is today, and the access to information definitely wasn't like it was today, or even 40 years ago, where you had television to talk about it, you had radio to talk about it, and it was put out on the AP wire, so every newspaper would talk about it.
Right. And
no,
go ahead.
Oh, a lot of times in newspapers, a lot of shit was just regional, unless it was a huge major story, and then the government would send it over, like for things about war or huge world disasters, stuff like that. But so a lot of the little stuff that Cayce did, a lot of people didn't really know about until this book was published.
Right. And once this book was published, and mind you, this is right at the end of World War II.
Yes.
Now public demand increased. And this is, a scale on how it increased, because people would just mail them letters to request readings. The demand increased so much that Gertrude had, that the post office could no longer deliver their mail. Gertrude had to drive to the post office and haul the mail back with a car.
Yes. This is remember how many times that you sent Michael Knight from Knight Rider, aka David Hasselhoff, a letter to get an autographed picture. Now, this is back in the day. People used to do this shit all the time. They used to mail celebrities so they could get like a response that's kind of like this. But now
Right.
think about these people are everybody who's got it's almost, oh, think of it in this terms. And now I'm not going to call him Jesus, but every time somebody like this gets out there, everybody comes out of the woodwork. It's like, oh my God, I got a heart condition. I got a leg. I got leprosy. I've got AIDS. You know,
Right.
cure this, cure that. They all come run to the faith healer.
Right. Well, and it's similar to this. Let's put it in today's perspective. Okay, I just won the lotto for like $300 million. How many people that I barely know are going to come out of the woodwork asking me for money?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
You know, you and I, we have a big family, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of our family that you don't talk to all the time. And I'm not calling our family, names, but everybody's got a bigger family when you win the lottery.
Yes. Yes. So at this point, because he was warned years ago to only do 2 readings a day or it would drastically affect his health. And this is in 1943, and at that point his readings went up to 4 to 6 per day.
Mm.
And he gained national prominence with a high-profile article in the magazine Coronet titled "Miracle Man on Virginia Beach." But people at this point were worried about their kids haven't come back from the war, and this is also a time where they discovered why some of his readings were not accurate, because he would be trying to do a reading, but the person was dead.
Right.
So
Yeah.
therefore, he couldn't get an accurate reading because the person was no longer alive.
Yeah. And remember, this is the time when this is the time when letters were hand signed, condolence letters, and they were hand delivered to fallen soldiers' families.
Right.
So, and when you're losing the amount of people that we lost, just like on D-Day, think about the tens of thousands of letters that had to go out to families, and they have to it takes a while for them to try to figure out. It's not like now they just put a GPS marker on each soldier and they know where their remains are.
Right.
This was a slow process. Just think about when you put the check in the mail for your mortgage and it doesn't get there in 3 days. We're talking slow planes that barely, ships had to take mail across the Atlantic. And so people are desperate at this time to try to find their friends and family.
Right. And, so he kept this up for quite a while. And then here's an example. From June 1943 to June 1944, he did 1,385 readings. So by August of 1944, Cayce collapsed from strain, obviously. When he gave a reading on this situation, the instructions were to rest until he was well or dead.
Oh.
So at this point, he and Gertrude went away to the mountains of Virginia. But in September, Edgar Cayce suffered a stroke at the age of 67 in September 1944 and died on January 3rd, 1945. He was buried in Riverside Cemetery in Hobsonville, Kentucky. If anybody wants to go and pay respects to his grave. And interesting note, Gertrude died 3 months later.
Yeah, almost to the day.
Yeah.
And she was 2 years younger than him. She was 65. And in 1944, on September 17th, the last psychic reading Edgar Cayce ever did, and I think it was deserved, he did for himself.
Yes. Yeah, because before that, the only ones he did for himself was for his laryngitis.
Yeah.
Everything was always for somebody else. This is the true definition of a selfless human being. If anybody should have, saintdom, it should be this man.
I agree with that too. Now, regardless of whether or not you think that Edgar Cayce was a fraud. You know, the psychic, the because we haven't really said much to the contrary in this episode. So even if you think that Casey was acting, or you know it was a charade, it's there's several others that I do think that are pretty similar. There's the Abraham Hicks one where the lady channels an entity, like a little boy named Abraham.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, a lot of people think that one's a fraud too. I'm a little on the fence on that one. But even if
Go ahead.
even if you think Casey's a fraud, even if you think the prophecies and all this other shit is absolute horseshit, you have to look at one thing that he did was he raised people's spirits. He raised their morale. He raised their belief in themselves. And he did it without accepting money.
Right.
He didn't profit from them. So it's not like these faith healers. He's not like, he didn't build the 700 Club. He didn't build Scientology. He didn't build any of these other cults that just are there to get your donations. And so even regardless if you think that he's a fraud or not, you have to respect the fact that the man was selfless and he did it to help others.
Right.
And he believed he was helping others.
Right. And I'm going to go through the controversies and criticism of him. The controversy, I'm reading again from the Wikipedia page, so bear with me. Cayce advocates some controversial ideas in his trance readings. In many trance sessions, he interpreted the history of life on Earth. One of Cayce's controversial claims was that of polygenism. And polygenism is the theory of human origins, which posits the view that human races are of different origins. I'm not going to go into the rest of it. You can look it up yourself. According to Cayce, 5 human races, white, black, red, brown, and yellow, had been created separately but simultaneously on different parts of the Earth. Cayce also accepted the existence of aliens and Atlantis and claimed that the red race developed in Atlantis and its development was rapid. Another claim by Cayce was that soul entitles on Earth intermingled with animals to produce things giant that were as much as 12 feet tall. Bigfoot!
Yeah.
Historian Olaf Hammer.
Giants.
Right. Historian Olaf Hammer wrote that many of Cayce's readings discussed race and skin color, and the explanation for this is that Cayce was not a racist, but was influenced by the occult ideas of Madame Blavatsky. Philosopher and skeptic Robert Todd Carroll, in his book The Skeptic's Dictionary, wrote, Cayce is one of the main people responsible for some of the sillier notions about Atlantis. Carroll mentioned some of Cayce's ideas, including his belief in giant solar crystal activated by the sun and used to harness energy and provide power in Atlantis, and his predictions that in 1958 the United States would rediscover a death ray that had been used on Atlantis. And in 1930s, Cayce also incorrectly predicted North America would experience chaos. Los Angeles, San Francisco would be among those that would be destroyed before New York. These events were to have happened in the period of 58 to 90. Again, you know this stuff's going to happen. You can avoid it.
Right. So going back to the death ray thing.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about that, because you said when you said that, and the dog agrees with me.
Yeah.
Tesla also talked about this same death ray.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after Tesla's death, the United States government came in and seized all of his work. In that work was how to build this death ray.
Right.
Now, I don't remember exactly the day that Tesla died, but they had the information to build this death ray right after Tesla died.
And interesting note, isn't it accurate that we, with a satellite, could strike a satellite out in space could use a laser beam to strike someone dead anywhere on Earth?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you call that a death ray?
That's a death ray.
All right. So fuck you, Robert Todd Carroll.
Yeah.
All right. So now we'll go into the criticisms. Those were shut up, dog. Sorry. Those were the controversies.
No, Madame Blavatsky she is the one that kind of gave everybody in the alien culture So when Casey's talking about the 5 races, Blavatsky kind of had her own version of the races too, and that's where the Nazis took the Aryan thing, which was the superior race, from her works. So she, at this time, she influenced a lot of people, good and bad, because well, what's his
Crowley.
yeah, Aleister Crowley was huge into her. The all the the main Nazis, Himmler, Hister, were all into Blavatsky's teachings. So was Rasputin. So she influenced a lot of I'll say contradictory thinking to the Christian values. So when Casey's talking about all the different races, I personally don't think that when he's talking about the colors, he's necessarily talking about races. I think he's just using them as loose labels,
Right.
and to be like because let's remember that he's speaking, his secretary is jotting is transcribing all this stuff, so it could have meant that he's saying something and she's just writing red, black, yellow, white. They could be Star Trek uniforms for all we know. They may not actually be races.
Right.
So that's my take on that. So, or he could have just been fucking racist. I don't know. I never met the man.
I don't think he was racist because everything else points against it.
Exactly.
Okay, so now on to the skeptics. Okay, skeptics challenge Cayce's alleged psychic abilities. Medical health experts are critical of Cayce's unorthodox treatment, which they regard as quackery. Why? Because they're not fucking profiting from it.
Right.
Science writers and skeptics have suggested that the evidence for Cayce's alleged psychic powers come from contemporaneous newspaper articles, affidavits, anecdotes, testimonials, and books. Martin Gardner, for example, wrote that while Cayce's trances did happen, most of the information from his trances were derived from books that Cayce had been reading by authors such as Carl Jung, P.D. Ouspensky, and Helena Blavatsky. Gardner's hypothesis was that the trance readings of Cayce's contained little bits of information gleaned from here and there in the occult literature, spiced with occasional novelties from Cayce's unconscious. Now, before I go on to the rest of them, I'm going to dispute this. You know how many books that he would have to read to get all the shit that all the diagnostics that he did? He would have had to basically be sleeping for 15 years to memorize all these books.
Right. And we have to remember the time period too. I mean, growing up in the growing up in the 80s, I tried to find a lot of these books, but they weren't in my local library.
Right.
I was interested in just learning about this counterculture, idealism and occultism and stuff, but I couldn't find them at my local library. So we're talking, pre-World War One,
pre-internet, where you could you could just get online and order it.
Yeah. So just how do you get the access, especially in rural Kentucky? How do you get the access to all this stuff?
Right. So now Michael Shermer writes in Why People Believe Weird Things. Uneducated beyond the 9th grade, Cayce acquired his broad knowledge through voracious reading, and from this he wove elaborate tales. Shermer wrote that Cayce was fantasy-prone from his youth, often talking with angels and receiving visions of his dead grandfather. Magician James Randi said that Cayce was fond of expressions like, "I feel that," and perhaps qualifying words used to avoid positive declarations. Examinations of readings do not show qualifying terms. I sense a bit of jealousy.
A little bit, yeah.
There's some envy going on there.
Maybe a Sequoia version of jealousy.
Yeah, I mean, especially the magician. He's like, why can't I be as famous as Cayce? Since I'm not, I got to knock him down. And again, go back to the books that, because the Shermer dude, voracious reading. Again, where's he getting all these books? He didn't have money.
Right.
He was broke. Okay, the next criticism is from investigator Joe Nickel. And who is Joe Nickel? He's an American prominent skeptic and investigator of the paranormal. He looks like a fucking douchebag. Although Cayce was never subjected to proper testing, which he was.
He was.
Yes, pioneer Joseph B. Ryan of Duke University, who should have been sympathetic to Cayce's claims, was unimpressed. A reading that Cayce gave for Ryan's daughter was notably inaccurate. Frequently, Cayce was even wider off the mark, as when he provided diagnosis of subjects who had died since letters requesting the readings were sent. Again, these people were already dead. Can't get an accurate reading from somebody who's dead.
Yeah, he's not a medium.
Right. All right, and again, he was tested. They tested him. I mean, we talked about Harvard came out and tested it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to find the dude's name.
Yep. While you're looking for that, I'm going to go on to the next one.
Hugo Westerberg from Harvard.
Okay. Science writer Karen Stolznoff has written, the reality is that his cures were hearsay and his treatments were folk remedies that were useless at best and dangerous at worst. Cayce wasn't able to cure his own cousin or his own son who died as a baby. Many of Cayce's readings took place after the patient had already died. Bullshit. Cured his wife of tuberculosis.
Yeah. Cured his son of blindness.
Yeah. There's no cure for tuberculosis.
No.
So.
There's no cure for blindness either.
Yeah. So she's full of shit. And of course, the traditional Christians are critical of Cayce's view on issues such as reincarnation, oneness, and the Akashic records. Because they're fucking critical of everything. They're fucking hypocrites. Shut the fuck up.
That's what Christians are.
So that is all the criticism of Cayce.
The point about that, too, about he was conflicted about it because of his own Christianity.
Exactly. We talked about that earlier. I mean, he went through this inner struggle, this inner turmoil for years until he convinced himself that this passage in the Bible talked about reincarnation.
Exactly. So, fuck that person.
Right. But yeah, so I mean, like we said, we're only scratching the surface. There's so much to this. And I mean, as soon as I get the money, I'm buying the membership because I want to read some of these things.
Yes.
Also, search Edgar Cayce. Go to Google, type in Edgar Cayce readings PDF, and you can download some PDF versions of them as well. I haven't yet. I'm going to, just because I find the shit interesting.
That's for our second Edgar Cayce episode, where we're going to go into a lot of the in-depth of the predictions and him into Atlantis and the book that his sons wrote.
Yes.
About him in Atlantis, which has got some interesting stuff. So I think that's probably all we'll do today on Cayce. Yeah.
You know, I can't say enough how much of an incredible human being this man was. You know, he was selfless, he was honorable, he cared for people.
Yes.
I mean, what else? I mean, that's what we should all aspire to be.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, that's just my little rant tirade. So, sum up today's episode. We talked about the lives and times of Edgar Cayce.
Cayce, coming at you live. Right. 22. Edgar Cayce.
So yeah, so we talked about Edgar Cayce. We gave some examples of his readings, talked about what he predicted, all that good stuff, and plugged his website several times.
Yes.
But yeah, so shout out to Edgar Cayce's ARE.
Yeah, that's right.
We're coming to check you out.
And we'll come back and do more Edgar Cayce after we check it out.
Yeah, hell yeah. You know, maybe we find some stuff in there that makes us go, maybe not so much.
Like we said at the beginning of the episode, we are here to try to inspire you to research these things more because we don't have all the answers. We didn't find all the answers, and we are on this quest for knowledge, and we want to bring you along with us.
Right now. So with that said, you know, love you guys. Peace out.
And insert tagline here. We'll see you.